Wednesday night, the briefing with Jen Psaki starts right now. Good evening, Jen.
Chris, first of all, I always watch your show before I do my show, and I just love Marilyn Thompson from the Post and Courier you just had on. Amazing. And yeah.
So good. And their reporting was so, like, again, it's hard stuff. This is like classic shoe leather. You got to go to public records, but like, okay, here's a bunch of facts. Can we confirm just these basic things to say that, like, you know, this stuff did happen?
And if you're wondering, anyone out there, why you should still subscribe to your local newspaper, that's why. I mean, they're doing incredible reporting. You're using, everybody's using, and it's kind of adding to the conversation. Anyway, I really enjoyed that. I loved her glasses,
awesome.
Everything about her. I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Okay. I have something to show you. And this something is something that the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, really does not want you to see. And it's probably not what you're thinking. I mean, it's not a top secret war plan that Pete Hegseth accidentally posted in a Signal chat, which there's still been no accountability for. It's not photos showing top Trump national security officials checking Twitter in the middle of a military operation. Those exist. It's not even this footage of Pete Hegseth ringing in the new year during his previous life as an anchor for Fox News, our Secretary of Defense, everyone. There he is on your screen. Those things all exist, but it's not any of those things. Now, the thing Pete Hegseth really does not want you to see is this photo. That one, right there, the one on your screen. Pete Hegseth at a Pentagon briefing, furrowing his brow as he takes questions about Trump's war of choice in Iran. And the reason I know that Pete Hegseth doesn't want you to see this photo is because the Washington Post is reporting that the Defense Department has now banned press photographers from the Pentagon briefing room over photos his staff have deemed unflattering. Now, that's according to two people familiar with the decision. Just to take a step back here, which is always necessary when you're talking about Pete Hegseth and really a lot of things in this administration. The United States is on the 12th day of a war with Iran. And with everything that the Secretary of Defense has on his plate right now, the thing he is focused on is whether or not press photographers are getting his good side, it seems. The former Fox News Weekend host apparently has very strong feelings about it. Now, this would be very weird, extremely self-involved behavior by a cabinet secretary from a far less important agency than the Department of Defense on a day with far less going on. But to perhaps state the obvious, there are a lot of other things Pete Hegseth should be worrying about right now. Because not only is this war about to enter its third week with no end in sight, but every single day we learn more about what a disastrous job the Trump administration has done in managing everything around this war. I mean, since day one of this war, Pete Hegseth has faced questions about a missile strike on a girls' elementary school in Iran, one that Iranian officials say killed at least 175 people, many of them children. It was one of the worst cases of civilian casualties during a military operation the United States has been directly involved with in decades. And given the evidence of a Tomahawk missile being used, a weapon only a handful of countries have access to, it's been clear that the most likely scenario was that the United States was responsible. And each time Pete Hegseth has been asked about it, he responded with some form of, we're investigating it, and left it at that. Well, today the New York Times reported on the preliminary findings from that investigation, and they confirm what we all suspected. The United States was at fault for that strike. And people briefed on the investigation told the Times that the military relied on outdated targeting data provided by the Defense Intelligence Agency. Those findings are preliminary, but they are shocking nonetheless, because while mistakes do happen in a war, there are serious questions about whether or not Pete Hegseth's leadership at the Pentagon and what he's done since he started leading the Pentagon may have made this kind of mistake far easier to make. And it's all rooted in how Pete Hegseth has implemented his new vision for America's military since the very moment he walked in the door, one that he likes to articulate with Dr. Seuss-style rhymes.
Maximum lethality, not tepid legality. Violent effect, not politically correct.
You can kill them in a boat, you can kill them in a moat. You can shoot them in the trees, you can shoot them in the knees. I mean, That ridiculous idea was more, though, than just a catchy slogan for Pete Hegseth, which he obviously practiced with his hairbrush in the mirror, because Hegseth actually went about trying to make the U.S. military more deadly and less accountable to the laws of war, following that Dr. Seussian sort of riddle he did there. Remember, this is the same guy who wrote a book where he questioned the necessity of the Geneva Conventions, asking, aren't we just better off winning our wars according to our own rules? He spent his first year in office firing or reassigning military lawyers whose job is to make sure that our armed forces follow the laws of armed conflict. And then Pete Hegseth went after the part of the Defense Department specifically focused on protecting civilians. In a new report released just yesterday, ProPublica details how Pete Hegseth's Pentagon dismantled the Civilian Protection Center of Excellence, an arm of the Pentagon tasked with trying to limit the number of civilian casualties on the battlefield. Now, when Pete Hegseth took over, the head of that civilian protection agency knew they were in trouble. And he even took steps to kind of try to rebrand the agency to make it sound more Hegseth-friendly, I guess. I mean, he even considered renaming it the Center for Precision Warfare to put the mission in terms Hegseth wouldn't consider woke, or at least wouldn't lead to him kind of putting it on his list of things to cross off and eliminate. But under Hegseth's leadership, the Pentagon gutted the Civilian Protection Center and pushed out its director, a decision that may have had deadly consequences. Because one of the jobs at that gutted agency was regularly checking and updating a no-strike list, which identified civilian targets inside a country that the U.S. was about to strike. Places like schools and hospitals, which are strictly off limits in war. So just a recap here. The Secretary of Maximum Lethality gutted the agency that checks and updates the list of schools and hospitals inside a country before an attack to make sure they are not targets. Then the U.S. goes to war with Iran and likely strikes an Iranian girls' school. And according to the New York Times, the Pentagon has a preliminary assessment that says the U.S. hit that school because our target list was out of date. Needless to say, none of this looks good for Pete Hegseth or his boss, for that matter, or really anyone involved in this, which may be why Trump's explanation of how this strike happened keeps changing. I mean, at first, Trump tried to blame the whole thing on Iran, even though we knew it was an American-made missile that hit the school.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 170?
No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran.
I don't know about it.
He doesn't know about it. I mean, first of all, any president would know about it. He also knew about it over the weekend. We know that. He had opinions about Iran being behind it. And he knew about it on Monday when that reporter asked him about it again. But now he doesn't know anything about it. Look, every day it gets more and more obvious that the Trump administration was completely unprepared for the consequences of this war, that they may have even undermined our strategic position going into it, and now they're trying to avoid the blame. I mean, to give you another example, right now Iran has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway that oil companies use to ship oil across the globe. And roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through that strait. And oil prices are spiking as a result of its closure, and governments around the world are considering tapping their own strategic oil reserves to compensate. Now, the country with the biggest strategic oil reserve is supposed to be the United States. And when Trump took office, he promised he would refill America's strategic oil reserves, quote, right to the top. But a year later, when Trump desperately needs those reserves to keep oil prices low as Iran chokes off key oil routes, they are still less than 60% full. And a new report from the New York Times reveals that in the lead up to this war, Trump's advisors actually downplayed the risk that Iran might close the Strait of Hormuz and send the price of oil skyrocketing. Yesterday, Senator Chris Murphy left a closed-door briefing with Trump's war planners, saying that the administration has, quote, no plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He also said they don't know how to get it safely back open. Which may be why Donald Trump's new plan is to just repeatedly encourage oil tankers to make the dangerous journey through the strait despite the deadly risks. I mean, here he was on that subject again today.
Are you talking to the CEOs of various oil companies, encouraging them to use the Strait of Hormuz
I think they should. I think they should. I think they should use the Strait.
He thinks they should use the strait. That's kind of what he keeps saying about it. This is an image provided by the Royal Thai Navy of a ship from Thailand that attempted to just use the strait, as Trump has been advising now for the last couple of days. And this ship was struck by Iran. The government of Thailand reports that 3 of that ship's crew members are now missing. See, Donald Trump was not prepared for this war to turn out the way it has. He thinks he can make demands and the world will listen. But that's not how war works. And it's clear to basically everybody paying attention that he has absolutely no idea what he is doing. I mean, he has repeatedly made completely contradictory statements about his plans for this war and how long it will be. And every time he is asked which of his diametrically opposing statements is actually U.S. policy, he just shrugs his shoulders and says it's both.
You've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to last
both.
for?
You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?
Well, it's both. It's both.
It literally cannot be both, but it's always both, even though it logically cannot be. And this just keeps happening. I mean, every day we get a news statement that contradicts the last thing they said. For example, here was Secretary Hegseth during an interview with 60 Minutes on Sunday.
Well, we're not flying a mission accomplished banner like George W. Bush on an aircraft carrier. We're not doing that, and we haven't done that.
Okay, no mission accomplished banner for us. We're not doing that, and we haven't done that. Well, Donald Trump didn't have a banner at his rally today in Kentucky, but he did say this.
Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
Does it feel like we've won? Trump says we've won. It was over in the first hour. That sounds pretty mission accomplished to me. All of this would be, well, concerning because he's the leader of the free world. Some of it is funny. If the consequences weren't deadly serious, and I've thought about this all day today and who I really wanted to talk to today. I've talked to so many smart public officials who are doing everything they can to hold this administration accountable. We'll continue to do that. But tonight, I really want to spend some time with people who I have actually sat with in the Situation Room and who I know have spent hours in these rooms to just really help unpack everything that is happening and not hold back in any way. Michael McFaul is the former U.S. ambassador to Russia during the Obama administration. Ben Rhodes was deputy national security advisor to President Obama. There's always so much to say each of these days, of these last 12 days, that we have all been covering and talking about this war. And I'm going to try to get to all of it, but I hope you will bring up things that have struck out to you, too. But Ben, just a couple of hours after Donald Trump said we won, we got some breaking news from Reuters. 3 sources familiar with the matter tell Reuters that U.S. intelligence indicates that Iran's leadership is still largely intact and is not at risk of collapse anytime soon. And this is just yet another one of these reports that we see every day where I think back to all of the hours you both, I spent some time in them, but you spent more time in them, spent in contingency meetings to discuss what would happen if you did things like struck Iran. And I just wonder, with that news and just everything you're seeing, kind of how do you assess where we are at this moment?
I think where we are, Jen, is that Donald Trump wants this to play out like on his own terms, on his own timelines. And that's not at all what's happening in Iran. It's not what's happening in the region. And it's not what's happening around the world. And all of what's happening is predictable. I did sit in contingency meetings about this exact scenario, a war with Iran, over a decade ago. And all of these things would happen. So first of all, the Iranian regime is not one man. It's not the 86-year-old supreme leader. It is a deep and ideological machinery that cannot be destroyed in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of airstrikes. Full stop. the most heavily armed, there are millions of people under arms in the Iranian system. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is the most powerful force inside of Iran. They're the ones that are going to emerge in any kind of power vacuum. They have. They're the ones who are backing Ali Khamenei's son as the new supreme leader. They're not going to give up power. They're just not. And maybe Iran will fracture into some civil war, but they'll be fighting in that civil war. You've now had the war spread to over 10 countries in the region. Lebanon has nearly 1 million people displaced because of the Israeli bombardment there. Israelis are in bomb shelters. The Gulf has been devastated by strikes against not just military but civilian targets as well. The oil is not flowing through the Straits of Hormuz. 20% of the world's energy goes through there. So that's a global problem. Americans have spent over $10 billion. The economic cost to the world is probably tens and tens, if not over $100 billion. Donald Trump does not control these things. Israel has a vote. The Iranians have a vote. What other actors in the region do have a vote. So this thing is way beyond his control. And they're not going to achieve their objectives of replacing the Iranian regime or getting unconditional surrender. That's not going to happen in a 2 or 3 week air campaign.
As I just said, it seems like he thinks he can just shout things out and the world's going to follow. And that's not how things work. It's not how war works, not how anything works. Let me ask you, Ambassador McFaul, about one of the things, the pieces of news I just talked about that we learned today that isn't particularly surprising given all the details that were out there in public reporting, but just that the preliminary investigation of that strike on that school in Iran found the U.S. was likely responsible. And Trump basically said, and I just played this clip, he didn't know anything about it. I mean, I kind of said there's no president who wouldn't know anything about it. But put in place, I think this is being kind of brushed over a little bit, the significance of this type of civilian casualty. You've sat in a lot of these meetings. You've been in these conversations with presidents. Talk to us a little bit about this type of civilian casualty impact and what the typical conversation would